Hello y'all, the month of August is over, so we are gonna go through everything I read in August. Reviews, ratings, plot line, story description, you name it, and I'm here to tell you about it. I've done a few book dedicated YouTube videos and I always get requests for more, so I hope that maybe this can spice up your TBR. I have lots of books to go through with you. I read 9 books in the month of August. 4 of them are romance, 5 were mystery thriller, 5 I read physical copies, and then 4 I listened to audiobook. I'm gonna pull up my Goodreads and my Fable, and that's where I review and go through my ratings for all my books. The first book I think is actually hilarious. It was an audiobook that I was listening to from the month of July into August, and it was called No One Can Know by Kate Alice Marshall, and this was a thriller mystery. I love listening to those kinds of books just because I think they're the most intriguing. That and memoirs or biographies are like my favorite things to listen to. This book was about this couple, Emma and her husband, who were going through like financial struggles, and they had to move from their home back into their parents' house in Emma's hometown, and she has 2 other estranged sisters, so there's 3 of them total. And once her and her husband move back into her family's house, a lot unfolds, a lot about her parents' murders, her sisters, how they contributed, who was involved. Everyone blamed Emma. Emma's forced to relive all of that, go through the trauma, and reevaluate how that all happened and what it had to do with her and her sisters and her family. They begin to question everything that was related to their murders, and their goal is to figure out what really happened to their parents. Let's just say this book was so freaking confusing. This book was such a miss for me. I rated it a 2 out of 5 stars. That's probably being generous. I'll read you my exact review. The book is called No One Can Know. I start off by saying, no one can know is exactly how I feel about this book. Because after reading the book, I was still so lost. The premise, the ending, everything. I was like, does anybody know what happened in this book? Started off strong, went very downhill, still confused on what happened and why. Too slow, too many characters, and didn't like any of them. And that's a very accurate way of how I felt about that book. I was like engaged in the first 50, 100 pages, and then after that it was confusing, it was boring, I was lost. The concept was there, but the execution was not. Now looking at it, it has a 3.6 on Goodreads. I think that's a little high. Would not recommend. Then we move on to some romance, and this was Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. This was my August book club pick of the month. This is the 2nd book in the standalone series by Carly Fortune. She has Every Summer After, Meet Me at the Lake, and This Summer Will Be Different. I really wanted to read this for book club just because it was such a summery book. I like Carly Fortune's writing style. This book is about Fern. She is a 32-year-old woman, and she ends up inheriting her mother's lake resort that her mom owned and ran like her whole life, and it's not something Fern ever wanted to happen, but she has to step into that role to take over her mom's legacy, and she reunites with Will Baxter, who she met 10 years prior. He's helping her figure out all things with the resort and the lake, and of course they fall in love. I really enjoyed this book, but I know a lot of people in my book club say that it started off slow for them. I disagree, but of course we are allowed to have different opinions. I thought that this book was well done. It provided good backstory. The characters were developed well. Something about both of the main characters just felt so special to me. Like they had this interlocking connection because they'd known each other 10 years ago and then reunited 10 years later, and I just love that. Right person, wrong time. And growing up, we always spent so much time at my lake house. I love the setting of this book so much. It just reunited those memories for me. I would recommend this to you. It's a great fast summer read. I'm just always gonna love anything about characters that go apart, come back together, and anything that's held at the lake. That's just always gonna be a great read for me personally. I enjoyed this, I really did. I have Carly Fortune's 3rd book, This Summer Will Be Different, on my shelf right there, and I need to pick it up. Great summer read, and a lot of you guys enjoyed it in my book club as well. The 3rd book that I listened to was Ellen Hildebrandt, The 5-Star Weekend, and this was my first ever Ellen Hildebrandt book. And if you don't know, she's just like renowned for having the best stories set in Nantucket and great depth in her writing style, very summery, but always has a little bit extra in it. I heard nothing but amazing things about this book, so when it came available on audio, I was like, yeah, I want to listen to it. I loved this book so much. It's about Hollis, who is a very famous food blogger, and after she has a terrible tragedy happen in her life, she's trying to reignite like her passion and her spark for all things in her life, her vlog, her family, her friends. So she decides to host this 5-star weekend where she brings one important special person from a different phase in her life. So like one childhood best friend, one college best friend, that kind of thing. But the catch is she invited one random woman that she met through her food blog She's never met her in real life, only communicated with her online. She brings them all together for the perfect 5-star weekend, and a lot unfolds under that. People who hate each other, people who love each other, all the different women have their own personal stuff going on, their own backstory. Hollis is realizing that while she was dealing with her own life, she didn't really check in with the people most important to her. She rebuilds these connections and dives deeper into each individual friendship while still bettering herself and her family. And there's just so much that unfolds in this book. I loved it. It felt like every time you thought, okay, that's it, there was something else. These women came from so many different backgrounds and places and had their own personal struggles. You were just unlocking so many different characters and subplots in their life. I really enjoyed Ellen Hildebrandt's writing style. I just love this book. I have to say, I cannot wait to read more by her. In my review, I said the story, the setting, the plotline, the characters, they were so developed and continuously growing throughout the entire book. I love that we got a little bit of each of their backstory. They all came together in the end, and I really want to try Hollis's food. I rated this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I would totally recommend, and let me know what other Ellen Hildebrandt books I should pick up. I'm so enticed in her writing now. Number 4, we have Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan, and this was recommended to me by a lot of you guys in my book club. When I was deciding for a book club pick, this was one that was in the running, so I decided to pick it up and read it myself. I was trying to squeeze in all of the final summer romance books that I could before we're creeping up on fall. This is about Allie. She is a professional organizer, and after her mom's tragic death, she is trying to figure out life. She ends up meeting her best friend's brother. They hit it off. He starts to help her rediscover all the good in the world, how to better love her children, how to look for the better, how to prioritize her career. They do go through some struggle between each other, push and pull within their interlocked families, because it's her best friend's brother. My best friend's brother is the one for me. That's what I was thinking like the entire time I read this book. I will say this is a cutesy summer read, but it wasn't anything special to me. I feel like the mom dying tragedy pipeline to falling in love is so overdone, and I know it's such a real thing. Maybe I just read too many of those books recently. That's what this was about. That's what this was about. It is a cute little summer read. They fall in love. There's a cute little dog. I don't know, like looking back at it now, it's not memorable. What I recommend if you want something light and airy, yes, there's no spice in this, which is nice if that's what you're into. It was meh to me. I think I gave this a 3-star looking back on it. I'd say yeah, that's probably right. 2.5, 3 stars. Like, it's not a bad book. It just wasn't anything special. It didn't stand out to me. I think the cutest part about this book is the fact that there is a little doggy on the cover. That's adorable. Then we have Heartless by Elsie Silver. Oh my gosh. I think this has got to be one of my favorite reads I've read this entire year. Definitely this month, I think. I don't know. I read a lot of good books this month, but this one just has a special place in my heart. This is a cowboy romance. It is the second book in the Chestnut Spring series, and I effing loved this book. It is spicy, it is sexy, it is rustic, it is cowboy. I'm just now understanding that I love a cowboy romance and I love Elsie Silver. I desperately need to get the rest of the books in this series and her other series. This is about Cowboy Cade Eaton. He is a single dad who works at his family's farm, but also with his son Luke, who is the cutest little boy. Something about a single dad trope. Cade really needs help watching Luke because Luke is a crazy awesome kid. He has a lot of energy, but he needs a babysitter. His brother's fiance, who the first book was written about, has her friend Willa come into town, and Willa volunteers to watch Luke for the summer. Because of that forced proximity, Cade falls in love with Willa. They have this very like love-hate, pull-tug relationship. He's like a gruff, buff countryman, and she's like this sexy bartender, and oh my gosh, there's an age gap. I'll read you the back of the book. Working as a nanny for the world's grumpiest single dad should be simple, except she can't keep her eyes off of him, and he can't keep her hands off of her. I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. This is a very spicy, I will say. This is a very different book than this, but holy moly, I loved every single second of it. I would highly recommend this book and this series. I need to read the rest of them. I'm just obsessed. Like, I don't know if I want to be friends with Willa Grant or if I want to be Willa Grant. 5 stars all around, immediately yes. Please pick this up. I think this is book number 5, but this was The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. I bought this hardcover book a while ago, and I got like 10 pages in and realized I just didn't want to read it at the time, so I ended up listening to this on audiobook. Honestly, I really liked the audiobook. I would recommend that that. That's just how I ingested this book. Obviously I have the hardcover, so I could have read it. This is about Rachel Price, who 16 years ago just disappeared, like fell off the face of the earth. There was this whole investigation, whether she was alive, whether she was dead, trying to figure out where the hell she was. And her daughter Belle was the only one who witnessed it, but she was 2 years old. She was a little itty baby, so she doesn't remember anything. And then all of a sudden, Rachel Price reappears out of thin air. And while she reappears, Belle and her entire family are doing a documentary on Rachel Price and her disappearance. So that stirs up the entire documentary. They're like, oh my gosh, the girl that we all thought was dead just reappeared. So that's kind of crazy. But since the case is being re-dragged up with all of this new information and the woman being found again, a lot is uncovered. And Belle takes the lead of discovering what actually happened to her mother. I enjoyed this book. I thought it was well done. I love Holly Jackson. I read her entire A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I thought it was done well, a little confusing at points, but it seemed to work itself out. I was hooked at the beginning, like I was very intrigued, and then it felt like it lingered on a little too long, and then it was like, oh dang, like that's what happened. I will say it felt a little bit predictable at times. It was like a 50-50 whether I could tell what was happening or whether I had no idea. It kept me guessing, but was also predictable, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of characters in here and they're all interconnected in some weird ways. It's a little bit hard to follow, but I did enjoy this. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think the reason I didn't continue reading it like physical copy was because I was a little lost at the beginning, so listening to it definitely helped me figure that out. If you're looking for a fast thriller this fall, I would recommend this. Number 6, I listened to None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I read a few Lisa Jewell books, so I was curious to listen to this one. It had really good reviews on Goodreads. This was a psychological thriller about 2 women that meet because they're birthday twins. They find out that they were born on the same day, at the same time, at the same hospital, and that starts this kind of weird friendship, working relationship between the two. One of them is a full-time podcaster and the other one works as a seamstress, and the seamstress comes to the podcaster and says, hey, I think you should do this story on me. Like, I'm really trying to reinvent my life. I think this could be really good for your podcast, because the podcaster focuses on like women empowerment, women getting out of shitty situations. So the podcaster is reluctant to say yes, but she does. They start working together, recording these sessions like every single day, and then out of the blue, the seamstress starts to become a little freaking weird, saying weird things, acting weird. There was some discourse about this book because the seamstress lady was in a relationship with a man who was 40 when she was 16, and obviously that's not okay. And I felt like a lot of his actions were justified. Like at the end of the book, there was a few like kind of uh-ohs in this book that I thought were like, that's teetering on the line of not okay, and like why are we justifying that? Like the big age gap. But overall, I thought the story was unique and the characters were like kind of crazy, especially the seamstress and her kids. That storyline was crazy. There's just a lot of different things that interconnect. It kept me guessing, it kept me hooked. I will say the ending was a little meh, not my favorite. I would check the trigger warnings before reading this. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4-star. I think this was a good psychological thriller, but again, read at your own caution because there are some questionable things going on in there. The 8th book that I read was Butcher and Blackbird by Brynn Weaver. Holy freaking moly. I'm going to recommend this book, but only if you like incredibly dark, twisted, gross, nasty things and dark romance. I've read some dark romance, but this is one of the first where I was like, dang, that's a lot. So this is a romance book about 2 serial killers. And one thing about me is I love a twisted serial killer book. I just enjoy that kind of content. I don't know what that says about me as a person. This man, Butcher, and this woman, Blackbird, come together. Every single year, they have a race hunt to kill the same serial killer. So they're serial killers, but they kill serial killers. That's where the twist is. Like, they're doing the wrong thing, but for the right reason. Like, obviously don't kill people, but if you're gonna kill somebody, like at least it's somebody who's a terrible person. I don't know. They get a name, they get a location, and they go after and scour that person on the same day every single year. It's like this rivalry between the 2 of them. They have a lot of tension, a lot of chemistry as they go throughout this challenge every single year. Their friendship blossoms and eventually that turns into more than a friendship. This had some pretty disturbing scenes in it, I'm not gonna lie. At some points when I was reading this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is definitely not for some people. If you know, you know, like the cookies and cream ice cream part in this book. There's just so many moments where I was like, oh my gosh, but also I can't put this down. You can't help but keep reading. I don't even know how to describe this book for you. Again, trigger warning, heavy spice, a lot of graphic details. This is the first book in a series of 3. I've heard not so great things about the 2nd and 3rd books. I don't know if I'll read those. Please read reviews and check trigger warnings before picking this up. Beware, but I liked it. And I'd recommend if you like that stuff. 4 out of 5 stars for me. That's it. That's all I gotta say on that. The 9th and final book I read this month was The Housemaid is Watching by Frida McFadden. I love me some Frida. She makes such good, fast-paced thriller books. If you're ever in a slump, I always recommend picking up one of her books because you will get through it in 2 days. Now, this is the 3rd book in the Housemaid series. I have the other 2 on my shelves right there, and I loved the first 2 books. This one was such a meh for me. I read it in 2 days, but it was just like meh. It wasn't a bad book, but it just wasn't anything special. I could have lived my life without it. It felt unnecessary to put out. This is about a family who move into their new dream house in this dream location. They had always lived in like this tiny apartment, finally got to move into a beautiful house. They come to find out that there's a lot of creepy, weird things going on in their neighborhood. They got some weirdo, creepy neighbors. I will say I liked that the characters continued over from the first 2 books. You do not have to have read the first 2 books to read this, but if you read the first 2, you would understand the characters in this book, which I like. It's like interconnected standalones. It was a fast read, like I'm not gonna lie. Would I recommend it out of all of Frida's books? No. Read the first 2 Housemaid books, but skip this one. That's what I'd say. All right, and that is it. That is the 9 books that I read this August. I feel like last month the reading was really good. I enjoyed a lot of what I read. I hope maybe you got some new recommendations from me. You can add some of these to your TBR. If you have any good recs for me, please let me know, especially as we go into spooky season fall. I love anything thriller, crime, mystery. Give me your recs because I would love to read them. If you enjoyed this bookish video, also let me know. I feel like I don't do these enough and I need to. While I got you here, I can't forget. My book club is currently reading Daydream by Hannah Grace for our September book club pick. If you are interested in reading this book or joining my book club, the link is down below. We discuss together and it's a great time over there. That's it for this video. I love you so much. I'll see you with a September reading wrap up if that's what you're interested in. Have a great rest of your day and I'll see you in my next video. Subscribe. Bye.